Joining me now is Robert Weissman. He is the president of Public Citizen. He fights against corporate corruption. He wants to keep them accountable, fights for government transparency, getting money out of politics, and an excellent guy to talk to during Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings. Robert, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
All right, great to have you here. So let's talk about how pro-corporate Kavanaugh is. So these days, almost all the Supreme Court justices are pro-corporate, if you ask me. I think even the ones that the Democrats nominate, they often brag are fairly pro-business. So, but within that context, is Kavanaugh significantly worse?
Short answer is yes. And what we did is we looked at the decisions he's been involved in where the court was split. So on the appeals court, there are typically 3 judges on a panel, so 2-1 decisions, or where the whole panel, 12 judges, split. That takes out the ones where it was an easy call and they really didn't have much discretion in what to do. When we did that and we looked at the cases that involve corporations, consumer cases, regulatory cases, environmental cases, worker rights cases, others, about 87% of the time he comes down for the corporation and against consumers, the environment, worker health and safety.
So I have to confess that I'm slightly surprised that it's that low. Only 87% of the time? I would have figured a guy like him might be 97%. But are there particularly egregious cases where he's sided with corporations against the employees?
Yeah, well, there are. And to the first part, I mean, we actually just tallied it up. So if he came out on the side of environmentalists, even if you said, my reasoning is completely against everything they're saying, we still tally that for the environment. So you actually look at the cases, you can get the number up closer to where you think it should be. In the worker rights area, which involve both employment cases, worker rights as employees, and also labor rights union cases, the most startling one is the SeaWorld case. And in that instance, an animal trainer at SeaWorld was killed by a killer whale. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration imposed a really modest fine on SeaWorld for not protecting the employee. And Judge Kavanaugh said, shouldn't have the ability to do that. He said, look, we have a long-standing arrangement and understanding that the Worker Health and Safety Agency doesn't patrol or police what goes on in sports or in entertainment. So just like they don't come down on the NFL or pro wrestling, they shouldn't have anything to do with SeaWorld. And he said, if we were to have something to do with SeaWorld, if the agency doesn't have to do with it, what a paternalistic decision process that would be. Who are we to come in and say whether or not workers should be able to take these risks that they otherwise want to take? Well, the majority, he was the minority in that case, thankfully, the majority said, well, the answer is we, the people, through Congress, made that decision, and that's what the agency exists to do, which is protect workers and not have to make them accept risks. You're saying things are off the table. And they also said that this idea that there's a long-standing understanding that the agency doesn't oversee entertainment was completely fabricated by Judge Kavanaugh. And of course, common sense tells you it's pretty easy to distinguish between a highly paid NFL lineman and a poorly trained animal trainer at SeaWorld.
So, Robert, is Judge Kavanaugh stupid? And the reason I ask that question is, does he really think that the average worker has enough leverage without the protection of the government and OSHA and workplace rules that they could just say, oh, I'll just take another job because I have all these wonderful job opportunities, and I'll go to one where the corporation in charge will treat me, throw flowers at my feet and treat me in a fantastic fashion, etc. Does he really believe that that's the world we live in, or does he just not care? He knows, he just doesn't care. He wants to make sure that corporations can crush you if they need be, and is the calculus behind that? Hey, if I'm pro-corporation no matter what, and I vote to crush employees at every turn, I'll get to go on the Supreme Court.
Well, he is definitely not stupid. And if you read his decisions, he is a great writer and he is a very effective advocate. So he is not stupid. There's an interesting question about whether he's a true believer or not. My sense is that he probably is. In the case of SeaWorld, I think he probably believed. Look, someone should have the right to take risks or not take risks. Of course, he ignores the power dynamics that you're talking about, and he's living in an imaginary society where people have equal bargaining power with their employer and have some ability to actually influence things. I think he probably does live in that very abstracted world. He's got an ideology that's real. In practice, the ideology is very fluid, so the ideology gets applied when it benefits corporations, and he finds exceptions to those where the ideology take him if it works the other way.
Yeah, that's why. Look, Robert, we agree. Of course, he's not stupid. That's why I asked it in that fashion. But I don't agree that it's his true ideology. I think that he, at a bare minimum, subconsciously knows, no, if I am as vicious as possible to employees, to the environment, to the average American, and as positive as possible to corporations, I'm going to have a much, much better chance of being appointed to the Supreme Court. I mean, because according to his logic, I mean, talking about public citizen, for people that don't know, you could let them know about it. But according to that logic, then Ralph Nader was wrong. Everybody should have the freedom to decide whether they're going to go into cars that have seatbelts or cars that don't have seatbelts, and the government shouldn't regulate.
You are exactly right, of course. That is the logic of what he's saying. And in fact, as you look at his decisions, he is across the board hostile to regulation in the public interest. He's okay with regulation to favor corporations. So, you know, it's hard to psychoanalyze the guy. I think and maybe the careerism is a part of it. Probably it is. I think he does have an ideology. I think he's not so attached to it. He doesn't know how to make exceptions to the ideology when it's necessary to reach the outcome that favors corporate interests.
Yeah, and I use that example because, of course, Nader saved millions of lives. I mean, that is a stunning fact. Millions of lives by getting the government to insist on seatbelts for everybody. Now, let's talk about his views on Citizens United. So he's proud to have clerked for Justice Kennedy. Washington basically feted Kennedy and have deep respect for him, all the people in the establishment. I do not. I think that Kennedy was the writer of one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in American history, and that's Citizens United. So are the Democrats making a mistake by not emphasizing that that Kavanaugh is for Citizens United, a roundly despised decision in America?
I think they're raising it a little bit. First, on the substance of it, of course, Citizens United is not just a bad reasoned decision, but really one of the worst decisions in the history of the Supreme Court, in the history of this country, with just ongoing, devastating consequences, as you and the viewers know. He hasn't ruled on many money and politics issues, but it is completely clear from what he has ruled on about both money and politics and about corporate claims to First Amendment rights that he supports wholeheartedly the logic of Citizens United and much more. Now, as to whether the Democrats are emphasizing it enough, for you and me, they should be doing it more. At the end of the day, what is going to be necessary, if there's any chance of defeating this guy, is to bring over two Republicans. The two most likely ones are Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. There's a decision that's been made that the best way to appeal to them is on the merits of what he might do to abortion rights and the Affordable Care Act. And I'm not sure that calculus is wrong. But to make the broad statement to Americans about what's going on and what's at stake, you can't say enough about Citizens United, and you can't delve deeply enough into how extreme his views are. This is something that you talk about and we work on. He believes not just that corporations are people and should have the same rights as human beings. He believes that corporations should have extra rights as compared to human beings. They should have more rights in the courts than regular people. They should have more immunities than regular people, more protection from being held accountable than regular people. And that's true throughout his jurisprudence in the money and politics area, but in many others.
So, Rob, how can people help in the fight against Kavanaugh?
Well, we're going to have about 3 weeks more. This hearing is going to conclude in the next few days. The committee will take a vote, and then it's going to be a floor vote. And I think there's two parts to the story if he's to be defeated. At the end of the day, of course, it's 51 votes, and it's just as simple as that. You got to count them. There is an issue about holding the more conservative Democrats, but again, even if all the Democrats vote the right way, ultimately it comes down to winning two identifiable Republicans. So the first part of the story is to have a national ferment. So it's clear that people are up in arms about this. And you do that through all the normal things. Most importantly, though, calling your senator. And the second piece of it is not just the national ferment, but a very focused demand from people inside Maine and Alaska, these two crucial states. They're going to have to put the pressure on their senators. If they don't, this is going to go the wrong way, and we're going to have to live with the consequences for decades.
All right, the website, by the way, is citizen.org. Rob Weissman, President of Public Citizen, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Thanks, John.